¿Crees que se pueden alcanzar los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible si trabajamos cada uno por nuestra cuenta? Yo estoy convencido de que no. Es por eso que me dio mucho gusto participar en el evento anual del Pacto Global, una iniciativa de las Naciones Unidas en la que reúnen a grandes empresas internacionales para trabajar y comprometerse en conjunto a alcanzar las metas de desarrollo sostenible de la Agenda 2030. En este encuentro tuvimos la oportunidad de platicar con tres de los muchos expertos que vinieron al evento, específicamente expertos internacionales con los que hablamos sobre finanzas sostenibles, sobre la importancia de medir y cuantificar el valor del impacto de las empresas y sobre cómo el marketing puede ser una herramienta para impulsar el impacto. El día de hoy te quiero compartir fragmentos de estas tres conversaciones que tuvimos con los expertos en el marco del encuentro del Pacto Global, con los cuales yo aprendí muchísimo y espero que tú también. Tuve la oportunidad de hablar con Claire Baumann, que es la Head of Sustainable Finance del Pacto Global a nivel internacional. Con ella, por supuesto, nos enfocamos para hablar de cómo las finanzas pueden ser una herramienta para la sostenibilidad. También platicamos con Daniel Aronson, autor del libro The Value of Values, que justo se enfoca en hablar cómo podemos cuantificar de manera contable, medible, el valor del impacto de las empresas para que deje de ser una conversación abstracta y se pueda medir con números en los estados de resultados. Y finalmente platiqué con Thomas Kolster, quien viene desde Europa y es un experto desde hace muchísimos años en utilizar el marketing como una fuerza para el bien. Sabrás que yo, como apasionada de la comunicación y el marketing, pues hicimos mucho clic y nos pusimos a platicar de cómo justamente el marketing de las empresas, los productos, las campañas puede ser una gran herramienta para atender y enfrentar los grandes retos de impacto. Entonces te quiero dejar estas tres conversaciones que tuvimos. Algunas son en inglés, porque obviamente ellos vienen de diferentes países, pero la verdad a mí me aportaron mucho valor y estoy seguro que a ti también lo hicieron. Chécate estas entrevistas y sigamos aquí en Disruptivo. La primera conversación es con Claire Baumann, quien es la Head de Sustainable Finance del Pacto Global, es decir, la mera de las finanzas sustentables. Con ella hablamos justamente de cómo los CFOs, las direcciones de finanzas y en realidad todo el foco financiero de la empresa debe también incorporar el impacto a sus métricas de resultados. Este es un tema que ya hemos tocado previamente en Disruptivo, sigue siendo bien interesante y bien retador para las grandes empresas que quieren generar impacto. Escucha lo que me dijo Claire.
What is your experience? Are companies starting to be more open about bringing their finance teams and the finance conversation?
I think there's a recognition that long-term investments and a long-term view are really important. We all are still, moving through COVID-19, the global shocks that created. I think that the immediacy of what can happen with the global crises, really touched people's lives and forced a conversation that many weren't ready to have or weren't having about, long-term viability. And I think if you're part of a business, let's say you're an architect or you work in building, we're running out of sand. How are you going to build? You need glass. If you produce coffee around the world, climate change is going to impact your business. And so really thinking about that long-term view, even in a market that's driven by short-term returns, is incredibly important. And I think there's a real opportunity to change hearts and minds and really demonstrate that it can also open up growth.
Okay. I love this, and this is a topic that's come up today a couple of times, this long-term view, this long-term investing, this long-term thinking versus the short-term results. And I think it's more of a balance, not just going from one to the other, but actually balancing both, because you need the short-term results, but if you only focus on that, then you tend to become more vulnerable now to kind of global effect going on. What kind of actions and are you seeing companies are taking on the financial level towards the commitments of the global pact and towards the sustainability goals? What's happening in the financial areas of the corporations that are already taking action, that are already involving this into their financial statements, financial planning?
We've made a really big, at UN Global Compact, and as part of the United Nations, a big commitment with corporate CFOs to invest $500 billion by the end of 2025 through the SDGs. So we do a lot of work through the CFO Coalition to collect data, benchmark, and really understand and help corporates understand how they can align their financing, align their investment with the principles of the SDGs. And that's really important because, as I was saying before, investors are increasingly asking, what is your action plan for climate? And that means understanding what your corporate strategy is, understanding, how are you starting to take actions through financing and investing? How is your executive connected into these types of issues? Those are all indicators to investors that you're thinking about sustainability seriously and ready to make action. And it can be a real differentiator in the market. I mean, there's so many opportunities to, I think, help sell and create sustainability solutions that a lot of companies have really dropped into. And so there is a real opportunity to unlock growth through sustainability and frankly, do good and make money along the way.
Yeah, which I think it's the conversation we've been trying to have in the last years. It's not only because out of goodwill, right? It's out of it's a good investment. It's a good plan. What are the main drivers for this? Like, what is driving companies to commit to these 500 billion commitments and investments? Is it a financial strategy? Is it goodwill? Is it just recognizing?
I think it's all connected. At the end of the day, we work a lot with investor relations teams who are interested and want to know what you're doing in the space. But it's really an opportunity for your brand to have visibility. You do a lot of work with brands, as I understand, and for your brand to have visibility and to demonstrate action to your employees, to your shareholders, to your local communities that you're doing something about it.
Yeah.
We've moved beyond the age of just PR, of just rhetoric, of talking about these things. People want to see action. Where are you putting your money? Where are you, are you putting your money where your mouth is?
Okay.
In the idiom. And so we help companies do that.
Okay. Are there areas where is it more profitable, or do you get better returns if you invest towards sustainability in product development and research, or in M&As, or is there different areas? Have you seen anything?
I'd say it really just depends on how your company is structured and what your overall corporate strategy is. Are you a small business, a medium-sized enterprise? Are you a big multinational company that's increasingly diversifying its market? I mean, for example, I think in the cosmetics industry, there's huge M&A going on right now because they're acquiring all of these clean beauty brands that are, linked to sustainability. That's what consumers want.
Yeah.
And so really thinking about it from consumer to M&A to finance to your CEO to your CFO, there's an entire kind of connected value chain that we all work in and respond to.
Well, that's very interesting. And it's probably, like I said, very different. The conversation for financial service companies is going to be very different to production or cosmetics or food. But actually, talking to you about this reminds me of I don't want to ask you something that you're not prepared and we can
just go for it. We'll figure it out.
But I heard this the analysis of this very interesting paper last year where we know that certain investors are putting their money more into, what this paper called green companies. Companies aligned with the SDGs or ESG, and taking more action, and taking the money away from what they call brown companies.
Yeah.
Companies that are polluting, that are not really having so many results. But what the interesting thing is that when they do a deeper analysis of this, the companies that tend to be the greener companies are companies that their own operations tend to be greener just because of what they do. Like financial services is greener than, let's say, mining, right?
Right.
And because financial services doesn't go into the ground, and mining has zero natural resources.
Yeah.
And this movement of resources from investors, what it ends up making thinking is these brown companies, since they're a strain of investment,
Yeah.
they have to go into worse practices from both sustainability, in terms of wages, in terms of everything, because they are losing the money. So it doesn't help them. It's not incentivizing them to become greener or to become more aligned with the ESGs. They have to survive. So therefore, their business models are
Yeah.
like, how do you?
I would say the opposite in some ways. I mean, that's an interesting report. I haven't read it, so I can't fully pick it apart.
Just to, just to clarify, I think the intention of the paper is not saying like, let's not invest in green companies. Let's work with brown companies.
Yeah. How do we do that?
So we can invest in them to become greener.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because you have to go deeper into this conversation. Yeah. What do you think about it? Like the conversation has to be deeper. It's not just, let's say, the money has to go to the green companies and forget about the other ones, no?
Well, I work with a lot of industries in our CFO coalition that are in the hard to abate sector, and they're gung-ho. They're really excited about sustainability. They see that they have challenges and they need cooperation. So they're really looking to partner with governments, to partner with new technology and innovation to address some of these long-term concerns. And so there may be people being left behind, but there's always a gap to be filled. And I think we're going to see, leading pioneers filling that gap or continuing to push forward.
That's interesting. So some of these holes are going to be covered by new companies, new players, new technologies, no? So that's an interesting.
There's just necessity is the mother of invention. I mean, we're facing big challenges, and every time humans have faced that in history, we always find ways to evolve. And so I feel confident that through new technology, global cooperation, a lot of different things, we actually have the tools that we need to fix some of these things.
Ahora seguimos con la siguiente conversación, la que tuvimos con Daniel, con quien hablamos de su libro The Value of Values y este gran concepto de cómo ponerle una medición al propósito de la empresa. ¿Cómo medimos de manera tangible, cuantificable, en los reportes, en los estados de resultados, el impacto positivo que generan las empresas? Daniel lleva haciendo esto desde hace muchísimos años y la verdad es que pude aprender mucho de él. En la medida en la que no midamos o el concepto del impacto siga siendo abstracto, las empresas no van a poder invertir capital, recursos y no van a ponerla como un enfoque de negocio. Para esto, él tiene una fórmula que nos presenta en esta conversación. ¿Qué necesitamos hacer para entender cada vez más ese valor sumergido y demostrarlo en la estrategia de negocio, ¿no? Y un poco en conjunto con la pregunta de quién es responsabilidad. ¿Es responsabilidad de los equipos de sustentabilidad? ¿De responsabilidad? Ayer hablábamos sobre los CFOs. O sea, ¿quién debería estar haciendo ese trabajo de encontrar ese valor sumergido?
La responsabilidad, la mayoría de los tiempos están con el equipo de sostenibilidad, porque nadie ve este valor con excepción de ellos.
Claro.
Y por eso hay 4 categorías de beneficios y el libro y nuestro trabajo es demostrar estas 4 categorías y usar sistemas de computadora y todo para cuantificar en dinero beneficios. Por ejemplo, los beneficios por los clientes. Tenemos que estaban para decidir, para demostrar los beneficios por los clientes en preferencia. Si tiene productos que hay más sostenibles. Y también las operaciones, como hemos discutido ahora, y también los riesgos. Porque hay muchos riesgos sobre agua, sobre calor, sobre la gente y seguridad y políticas y todo eso, gobierno, y también empleados. Porque si los empleados saben que la empresa tiene valores, los empleados están más emocionados de trabajar por esa empresa. Y casi todos saben que eso es verdad,
Ajá.
pero no habían cuantificado este
Sí, no se ha
beneficio.
medido. Ajá.
Y por eso crean que hay mucho menos valor que es la verdad. Como $300,000
Ok.
en vez de $30,000 millones
Ok.
después de usar la computadora y los técnicos para cuantificar el beneficio.
Está interesantísimo eso porque o sea, hoy se ve menos del 1% del valor de todas estas acciones.
Sí,
Re-
o 10%, pero mucho
Ah,
menos que es la realidad.
Oye, a ver, nada más rápido para repetir las cuatro áreas, ¿no? Decías, en los empleados, hacia los clientes, ¿cuáles eran las otras dos? Operativo.
Operaciones
Ok.
y también riesgos.
Y perfecto. Porque creo que es importante, digo, tu trabajo ha sido crear mucho de este conocimiento que realmente no existe y que además no hay método para operar. Hay que decir que tu libro o sea, está publicado por MIT.
Sí,
O sea, hay toda una metodología científica detrás
sí, exactamente.
y hay toda una serie de pasos para que esto se implemente, se opere, que no podemos aquí contarlo todo, pero me encanta la idea de dar más herramientas técnicas y concretas, porque la gente que te escucha dice, bueno, pues sí, sí es el trabajo, en México decimos la chamba de los de sustentabilidad, pero el cómo es lo importante y tú nos ofreces ese cómo, el cómo lo vamos a hacer.
Sí, exactamente.
¿Ah?
Entonces, muy importante
Ajá,
porque hace más fácil
ajá,
para cuantificar todo.
ok.
Y si no está cuantificado, es difícil creer por las que trabajan en finanzas
Ok.
o en operaciones o los ejecutivos de la empresa. Y por eso usar
Herramientas.
herramientas es mucho mejor para demostrar y cuantificar. Y eso es la razón que, que hacemos herramientas.
Ya. ¿Nos podrías dar, sin pretender que nos cuentes todo y cómo funcionan todas las herramientas, nos podrías dar un ejemplo de cómo de cómo estas herramientas nos ayudan a cuantificar esto? Eh, Hace rato me dijiste un concepto, bueno, que vamos a llegar más adelante, pero si le pones al Excel, ¿no? Pues no sé cuánto valor me da ser sustentable, pues el valor es cero. ¿Cómo funcionan estas herramientas? ¿Qué acciones se miden para empezar a cuantificar este valor sumergido?
Las herramientas están en el Internet.
Ajá,
Excel está más o menos bien, pero tiene que usar muchos datos especiales.
ok,
Y eso es la razón que tenemos 500,000 puntos de datos
ok,
de clientes.
ok,
Y también tiene que usar números especiales para la empresa, como el costo de empleados o el precio de los productos.
ajá,
Y por eso tiene que poner todos los factores en las herramientas.
ok.
Y tenemos herramientas en el Internet para que empresas pueden usarlos de donde está.
Me encanta esto suena como que es una labor compleja, pero me gusta saber que también hay una metodología para empezar paso a paso a implementarla. Oye, hablemos de otro concepto que es muy importante y muy interesante que planteas tú, que es el concepto de las 3 carreras. Que tú dices que las personas estamos simultáneamente corriendo 3 carreras.
Sí.
Y tienen mucho que ver con esto también. Cuéntanos.
Sí, primero es la carrera para hacer beneficios por el mundo
Ajá.
y la gente que vive en el mundo.
Okay.
El segundo es en el mercado, para suceder, para tener éxito en el mercado.
Okay.
Y el tercer es para la gente, para individuales,
Okay.
tener éxito en su vida. Y es importante correr en los 3 al mismo tiempo,
Okay.
porque si no, no es posible hacer algo para el mundo si crear problemas para el mercado, porque el CEO va a recibir noticias
Okay.
y eso no va a tener éxito. Nadie va a decidir que voy a hacer algo para el mundo, pero para mí no voy a tener trabajo.
Claro.
Y eso es la razón que practicamos bastante de los beneficios financieros de los valores. Porque sí hay beneficios por el mundo y también para la empresa y también por los individuales.
Por último, te quiero compartir la conversación que tuve con Thomas Kolster, apasionado del marketing y de cómo este puede ser una herramienta por el impacto. Por supuesto, como te imaginarás, hicimos mucho clic porque me encanta y me apasiona la comunicación de impacto. Con él aprendí mucho sobre cómo las empresas pueden utilizar el marketing como una herramienta positiva. Vamos a escucharlo.
How can companies, when doing advertising or communication or launching new products with a sustainability focus or at least with a care for sustainability, how can they not fall into greenwashing? How could they not fall into where, because I think now people are, not everyone, but people are more aware and are more cynical in terms of, if a company telling me that they recycle, it's probably because they are terrible. So you do want, when you do want to create impact and you want to communicate it, you don't want to be greenwashing, or how we as customers can see through that to really find those companies who are doing it because they're interested.
I think there's a couple of things to it. I mean, with my first book, I think there was a time for that. And I think in some ways, still in Mexico, there's a tendency to, when brands talk up about some of these topics, it still generates brand love. It might still generate brand growth because the market isn't as long in this sort of evolution of this. But when you come to markets where a lot of brands talk about it, the difference is how they really differentiate. And that's why I say this is about the delivery. Also because this is the interesting business case. Because essentially what we want to do is we want to understand how to get more people to buying into sustainability. That's basically the business principle. Because if we get more people to buy into sustainability, there's a business case for the company. Because it's this sort of like egg or the hen type conversation. You know, companies say, oh, we want to do more sustainable products if people are buying it. And then people are leaning back and saying, hey, you know, if you do sustainable products, we might be buying it. So I say, if we can bridge the gap between the amount of people who buy sustainable products, that's what we want to aim at. So the model and the framework I look back at human psychology, coaching, psychotherapy, to try and understand what actually changes humans' behaviors.
Okay.
And I created this model called the arrow. And the key question in the arrow is moving the perspective from the company to people, asking who can you help people become? So how can you as a company help me on my journey towards sustainability, helping me on my journey towards maybe facing some of my own biases? And when you do that, you obviously change my behaviors. So one of the examples I shared today was, for example, Oatly encouraging us to embrace plant-based eating, drinking, etc. When they do that, it's a good business case for them. So I really fundamentally want to get the companies not to do these narratives where, like, look at how great we are. They essentially moved from talking about how great their products were, like, look at us with the toothbrush or the toothpaste that's best as giving people white teeth, to saying, oh, look at us, we're actually the best citizens in the world. We are responsible, we are blah, blah, blah. So I understand why people don't trust these companies, because we've seen it again and again and again. Companies failing, over-promising, which is what I call the hero trap. When you say, we're going to save the world, obviously, at some point, people will see that they will fail, right?
Yeah. Oh, I love this topic, and I think it's such a valuable lesson here. When I think you just put it in very simple terms for me. When you hear something, or when you see a company and it feels like what they want to do is put themselves a medal,
Yeah.
then you create this sort of like, whoa,
Yeah.
no, I'm not buying it.
Yeah.
Versus the companies that are telling you or are giving us the chance to do it ourselves. Like,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of,
And it's a much better business case, right? Because what I noticed was when the companies suddenly started thinking about your transformation. So let's say, even if you're in the car industry and you say, okay, we actually want to move people from A to B in the most sustainable possible way.
yeah,
Suddenly perspective is completely different from going out and saying, hey, look at us, we're greening our supply chains, we're blah, blah, blah. So innovation suddenly unlocks a lot more possibility in terms of, okay, what do you want to do then? Do you want to raise the amount of EVs? Do you want to maybe go into electric scooters? Maybe that might be better in Mexico City. Do you want to do bicycles? Maybe you could do a BMW bicycle, a cool bicycle, the ultimate driving machine. Maybe that's what you want to do. But it fundamentally takes a shift in perspective and leadership to unlock that.
yeah. I don't know. I think like right now we just had such a good piece of knowledge. You mentioned leadership, and I
Yeah.
want to switch a little bit from the role of the companies to the role of leadership. I think that we've interviewed a lot of companies and a lot of people in leadership positions, and my perspective is that it takes these kind of champions or leaders in companies to start these movements. What do you think is the role of leadership in sustainability? The role of leadership, what role the companies or the people that are looking at us that work at these companies, what kind of leadership should they have or foster to really make change possible?
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? Because we need leaders. The world has
Yeah.
never needed more bold leaders, and
Positive.
yeah, and I look for leaders, right? And the challenge is when we look to government, we know that these leaders change every 3 to 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Maybe they go right wing, maybe they go left wing. So we can't trust governments. Like, look at the UK; they change leaders more often than I change underwear. So it's like we can't trust them. And we see the same in companies, right, where leadership changes again and again. We saw Paul Polman, we saw it with Danone, with Emmanuel Faberge. So ultimately, what I see a lot is people, even inside the organizations, like people who sit somewhere and say, I'm really passionate about this topic of sustainability and climate. I really want to do something. And funnily enough, they always get the sustainability hat on. Most often they don't get more pay, shame, but they get the hat on. But I see a lot of that sort of internal change and that internal leadership is essentially what drives a lot of this stuff forward. It really, really is. And for me, I think there are two types of leaders. There are the leaders that are very busy about making themselves shine. And then there are the type of leadership who is about empowering other people. And so for me, the best leaders are those who help me achieve amazing things. And in some ways, even if you look to the US and you looked at when Barack Obama stepped down and his last speech in Chicago, where obviously he also was elected senator, it was really about saying his leadership is not about people believing in him as a leader, but it's about people believing in themselves and their ability to create change. And so for me, that's the true leadership. That's a leader that empowers people, that brings people along, And ultimately, even on a brand perspective, the brands that helps us minimize the friction, the barriers for that sustainable change that we all want to see happen, right?
They're really making me think, because it's kind of, I even sometimes counterintuitive versus what we are seeing in Latin American politics. We are seeing the rise of these very charismatic leaders that put themselves at the center of the conversation. Not only, I mean, I say Latin America because that's where, not the region that I know more about, but it's happening all over the world. It happens in a lot of organizations and the startups, that these roles or these leaders present themselves as the one. So it's not really what I see happening everywhere. But it's really interesting to question ourselves and to give some practical advice. How can you become that kind of leader? How can you become a leader that gives others the potential or the abilities or the space or the tools to create, to have that impact, to have that change, to become the better versions of themselves that the companies and the brands need?
I think it really just essentially, it's very simple. I mean, so often we talk about customer centricity in some ways, right? You need to focus on your customer. But I think so often we just forget to put ourselves in other people's shoes.
Empathy,
Yeah, empathy, right? And truly understanding what it needs to drive the change. I mean, today I learned something that was absolutely heartbreaking, that obviously a lot of Mexicans only have about 5,000 pesos to live for. And what type of leader, what type of leadership do those type of people need? And I think the challenge is so often when we talk about sustainability and climate, there's a lot of finger pointing. We point fingers at people and we say, oh, but those people are climate deniers, or farmers are bad. And for me, that's the wrong way of leadership. Because sustainability should be about inclusivity. It should be about inviting everyone on board. And if you don't have a lot of money, and you really want to do the best thing for the planet, you're in a terrible situation. So instead of pointing fingers at people or servicing products that are more expensive, how do you actually help these people do that transition? How do you empower them? How do you enable them? And I think that's the type of leadership we need right now. That's leaders that are there on the ground, understand what are the average Mexican faced with. And that's why I don't like sustainability to become some sort of moral crusade. Why I don't really like the title Mr. Good Advertising, because it sounds like good and bad.
Like there's some evil corporations.
Exactly. And I think that's an important thing to say. We need everyone on board. I don't really care the political beliefs or anything like that. We all share this planet, and it's so fundamentally important that we got everyone to join forces in this.
Espero que te hayan aportado mucho valor estas conversaciones que tuvimos en el encuentro anual del Pacto Global. Este esfuerzo de las Naciones Unidas para reunir a los grandes corporativos nacionales e internacionales para que se comprometan en conjunto para trabajar en el marco de la Agenda 2030. Yo estoy muy agradecido con el equipo del Pacto Global, a quienes les mandamos un enorme abrazo por habernos abierto las puertas y permitirnos compartirte los aprendizajes que tuvimos durante el evento. Si quieres seguir aprendiendo de cómo las empresas o las y los emprendedores pueden trabajar para resolver los grandes problemas sociales y medioambientales, no te olvides de suscribirte a nuestros canales aquí en Disruptivo, en YouTube, en Spotify, en iTunes, en donde sea que escuches podcast, y por supuesto seguirnos en redes sociales. Nos escuchamos en la próxima edición de Disruptivo. Hasta luego.